right, welcome to our week 6 video. You like my jokes today? Hey honey, how was your work in the nervous system? Great, I was fired.
Ooh.
Right? My husband doesn't think that one's very funny. Here's another one. Are you a myelin sheath? Because you're getting on my nerves, right? So these hopefully are a little bit funny because you have been studying the nervous system and neurons in the past week. And in this video, I have a whole bunch of review activities so that you can kind of see, do I need to study some more, or do I have down what I worked on in week 5? All right, so what am I going to do in this video? I'm going to show you a little technique of making your own test questions as we kind of review. We'll review the nervous system, we're going to review neurons, we're going to review the parts of the brain, and we'll look at what work you got to do in week 6. So let's see here. Remember, you looked at the nervous system, right? So I gotta get your answers out of the way. So I'm going to go slow with this, as slow as I can go. I know I'm not very good at going slow, but let's see. So we have a nervous system. What are the two groupings, right? The nervous system is broken into two different parts. Pause the video and see if you can write down those two parts. And then when you're ready, hit go, because, right, the two parts are the peripheral, which I have up here, and the central nervous system, which is made up of the brain and the spinal cord, right? So we have all of these nerves outside of our brain and spinal cord. That's peripheral, and the central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. They tend to ask a lot of questions on this. And somehow I completely lost my other picture there, which is not cool. Anyways, peripheral nervous system. It's divided also into two, right? Do you remember how the peripheral nervous system is divided? It's divided into the autonomic, which I should have told you to pause, but pause and see if you can do the other one. All right, it's divided in the autonomic, which this is what controls the self-regulated actions of our internal organs and glands. You are not thinking about this, right? You don't have to say, hey, stomach, digest. Doesn't happen, right? It's automatic. It does it on its own. And the somatic, this is soma, meaning body. So this is the part of you that says, hey, hand, move, right? And the nervous system sends the message from your brain into the peripheral nervous system, and you're able to control the movements of your hand. All right, so now we have the autonomic. Again, can you divide it up into two groups? All right, pause the video, see if you can write down those two, and then you can correct yourself if you're wrong. When you're ready to go, right, we have the sympathetic, arousing, and the parasympathetic, calming, which maybe I can, there it is. I had it here. All right, I had a very good graphic for this, right? Our sympathetic nervous system is all the things that make us more alert. So our pupils dilate, our heartbeat goes up. Remember, this is all done automatically, right? So I see something that I think is a snake. It makes me more alert. My pupils dilate, my heart beats faster. My stomach, if I'm digesting food, says, hey, wait a second, we don't need to do that. We might need to run away, right? Not something we're going to do. All right, if we were going to run away, our liver releases glucose because we need glucose in our blood to run. Our adrenal glands will put out epinephrine and norepinephrine, right, getting us more excited. And, whoops, didn't mean to do that, right? Our bladder might say, hey, we're not going to go pee right now, right? It's going to wait. All right, now.
Or you might pee.
Or you might pee your pants, my husband says. He's not making it very easy to make a video this morning. All right. Now, the opposite of that, this is also done automatically, right? It's part of the autonomic nervous system, is when we get in a calming state. And if you ever, I actually really find that there's certain music that helps this happen, or if you do yoga, there's certain yoga poses that will immediately put you into a calming state, or deep breathing, right? If you're in a bit of a panic, that you start to take deep breaths, right? And what's going to happen? Our heartbeat's going to slow down. We can digest when we're in a calm state. Bile is also part of digestion, right? We can go to the bathroom if we're in a calm state, right? Ever tried to pee when you're scared? Really hard to do, right? Because you're not in that calm state. So the autonomic is broken into the sympathetic and parasympathetic, right? One is about arousing and getting us ready for action, and one is about helping us calm down. Now, last part, we have the somatic. Can you think of the 2 ways the somatic system is divided up? Right? Pause the video, see if you can write it down. All right, we have sensory input and we have motor input, right? So we have things coming into our eyes, ears, touch, and we have control of our skeletal muscles, which makes sense, right? We can choose to pay attention to different things, right? This is why it's under our control. All right, so hopefully you got those down. The AP, they love to have questions on this. Now, I said to you I was going to give you a skill, and the skill I have is writing test questions. My first psychology teacher, I remember it in university very well, he said, "You ever wonder why there's so much space on the margins of your textbooks?" And I understand you have more digital than not, but he said it's so you can write test questions. He says, so as you're reading, stop and see if you can make some test questions up, right? And I have a few here to kind of get you started, right? Degeneration of the myelin sheath, right? Maybe you don't even have to necessarily write the answer choices, just write questions as you go, right? So you can read these questions. I'm not really putting them here to answer them at this point. I just want you to get in the habit, and I'm going to have you do this as we work through the slides here, is can you write test questions as you're studying, right? Or even we can also use diagrams, right? So here's the next part to check. Here's the neuron, right? You did a whole bunch of activities last week with the neuron. So can you say what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are? Pause the video, write in one color, and then you can check your answers. So when you're ready to go, hit play again, and you can check, right? Axon terminals is 1, 2, myelin sheath. That was part of my joke, right? The myelin sheath is what helps the neurons go very quickly, right? Then we have the axon, we have the nucleus, we have the cell body, which is the whole part here that holds the nucleus, and the dendrites. Stop. Can you write 3 questions? What are 3 things that you might be asked about the neuron, right? You can put these in your notes and just pause and write your questions and then go on, and you'll upload these when you're done with the video. All right, next one. Let's see, what do you remember about the synapse, right? The place where these two neurons, they don't touch, right? They come together and they're communicating with each other. What do you remember? We have part A, part B, part C, part D, part E, part F. This is saying neuron X and neuron Y, but which 2 ends are meeting, right? I'll give you a hint. One's an axon and one's a dendrite, right? Or the terminal end and the connecting end. Which is which? That's X and Y, right? The other part to do is these are the neurotransmitters: norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, which is abbreviated ACH, GABA, endorphins, right? Can you match which? So each one of these groupings is what the neurotransmitter does. So can you match these to each other, right? So pause the video, right? See what matches, or see what you remember, see which match, and then go on to check your work. So here we go, right? A, we're pretty sure that they're wanting, this is the action potential weighting, although we had a little go back and forth about this before. B is a vesicle, and inside the vesicle is the neurotransmitter. All right, C is the synapse, right? The space between the neuron is the synapse. D is the receptor, right? E, the little things in between, are the neurotransmitters. F is the calcium channel, right? That's going to allow for the neuron to come back so that it can release neurons again, right? X is the axon, right? The axon is away from the body. That's how I remember it, axon away. And Y is the dendrite of the neck. So dendrites receive, axons send out, right? Can you write 3 questions about how one neuron speaks to another? All right, so pause the video here and see, can you come up with 3 things that you think might be asked about this process? And then you can go on to check your neurotransmitters, right? Norepinephrine is about arousal, learning, and mood. Serotonin, mood, sleep, hunger, aggression, arousal. So many things are controlled by serotonin. And do you know that your serotonin, the beginning processes of when it is made is in your stomach, and it has a lot to do with your microbiome. So having a healthy microbiome often leads to adequate serotonin production. Dopamine is your pleasure pathway, mood, emotion, arousal, and learning, right? It's, do I want to get up and do something? Acetylcholine is attention, arousal, muscle action, movement, memory. GABA, it inhibits axons, right? So it says, go to sleep, right? Slow your movements down. And endorphins, pain, right? And natural opiates, pain relief. Also, when you're really feeling good, right? So in some ways, so our street drugs, if we want to talk about street drugs, they often interact with or not interact, they often act as if they are dopamine and endorphins. Which brings us to, what about street drugs? How do they impact the process of neurotransmission? I have a small diagram here, I have it covered up. So we have that receptor site, remember? We said the D was the receptor. So we have these things that turn on the neurons. See if you can pause the video and say, what's happening here? What's happening at that neuron? How do they impact this process of neurotransmission? Right, and when you're ready, restart the video. All right, so the neurotransmitters, they're like the little puzzle pieces. They're what open the channels so that things can turn on or turn off the next neuron, right? Sometimes street drugs, these are the drugs, sometimes they are agonists. So these are when they mimic, they act the same way that the neurotransmitter does. So it doesn't have the same exact shape as the neurotransmitter, but it's good enough that it can be the key. It can open it, so agonists open and make it as if that neurotransmitter is there, or they can be antagonists, and these are going to block the site, so they're not going to allow the neuron to be used as it was. So drugs, street drugs can be agonists or antagonists. One opens it, one keeps it closed. And the real problem we have here is that if you have some normal amounts of neurotransmitter turning on receptors, if we kind of come back here to seeing these total receptors, if these things are being turned on way more than the body really wants, it has the ability to make more receptors. So basically, don't think of it as like one receptor turns on the neuron. It's kind of like a flood almost. It needs so many, and if the body says, wait a second, we're not supposed to be so active, the neuron can actually make more receptors, which is why we have this idea of needing more and more street drugs to have the same effect, right? The idea of tolerance. All right, last one. What do you remember about the parts of the brain? All right, so pause the video, see what areas do you remember where they are. All right, and then start the video again. And we have the two hemispheres, left hemisphere and right hemisphere. The part that connects the two hemispheres is called the corpus callosum. Very interesting. There are more fibers in the corpus callosum for women than men, right? The two hemispheres do speak better to each other for women than they do for men. Interestingly enough, this is why women are not as good with giving directions, because our brain is not compartmentalized as much as a man's brain, so left and right often get confused. My husband will tell you that I often say right when I mean left when I'm giving directions in the car. We also have in the very center, we can start from the bottom. We have the cerebellum, right, is the mini brain. You can see it here even better. If you're an athlete or a musician, it's amazing that this can be programmed very well for muscle movements. I just played basketball last weekend. I hadn't picked up a ball for a year, but my cerebellum is so programmed to control my motor movements that I don't need to think, because I trained and trained. And it takes about this is where the 10,000 hours of practice comes from, because that's about how long it takes to take away from this isn't all on here, but you have your prefrontal cortex, which controls motor movements, until they're automated into the cerebellum, and that does take about 10,000 hours. We have the starting back here. So we had the cerebellum, we have the spinal cord, we have the medulla, I don't know if you've ever probably not seen it, but in an old movie called Waterboy, it was an Adam Sandler movie. I always remember he said medulla oblongata, right? And it has to do with your reptilian brain. Same thing with the reticular formation in the pons. All of these things we share with pretty much, think of them as the alligator brain. They're the parts that are gonna make sure you sleep and you eat and you breathe. And what's cool about this reticular formation, another kind of fun fact, is when you sleep, your brain actually closes off all transmission to the spinal cord. There's a condition called sleep paralysis sometimes where people are awake enough to be alert and they feel they can't control their body, and this is because the reticular formation hasn't kind of sort of say unlocked the pathway from your brain to the rest of your body. It can be quite scary. The pituitary, when you look at the endocrine system, you're gonna see how the pituitary connects, both pituitary, hypothalamus, thalamus, these all sort of go and connect with your endocrine system. Hippocampus, hopefully you're remembering it, is for memory, and exercise throughout your life will help you make new. They always said you're born with as many neurons as you have. Not true. We can clearly see that those who exercise through their life continue to make new neurons in the hippocampus. And the last part here, the amygdala sitting on the very end. Your amygdala is kind of your big fear response or anger. They can see in prison inmates, the amygdalas of prison inmates are often bigger than those of the general population. So that is my quick view of the brain. Again, I don't have it here, but maybe make some questions, right? That act of making questions is very useful. Okay, last part of the video, there was me finding jokes, is we need to look at your week. So let's look at week 6. You're going to move into the endocrine system, right? So this really is knowing where the glands in your body are located, what hormone do they put out, and then what does that control. You're going to also look at 2 parts here: brain research, how do we study the brain, what are the techniques, and looking a little bit about brain plasticity, which means your brain's ability to adjust to the environment. And I'd like you to spend a little bit of time, this time in your life as an adolescence is the second most plastic time in your life after being a baby. And so you're going to get to see a little bit of, are you taking advantage of that? Right? Have you do a bit of a discussion. You're going to look at nature versus nurture and why it probably shouldn't say nature versus nurture, probably should say nature and nurture, right? The degree to which our genes and our environment help shape who we are. And in that, I'll also have you do a little bit of, are we adapted for our environment, right? Have we had enough time in our kind of evolutionary history to really live in a way that we're supposed to, or that matches what's best for us? All right, so that's the week. If you have questions, let me know. For this video assignment, you're going to upload all the work you did, right, and checking yourself and the questions you wrote. Thank you. Have a great week.